I think I got you guys duplicated in here. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Welcome to another episode of Confab. I have with me I think we're called the Three Musketeers now, has been quoted in some of the internal company jokes that are there. Mr. Marcus Haug and Mr. Adam Hallbeck. Gentlemen, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Let's push it to this one. This one feels a little bit better for the look and feel with it. So, what? Curly, Larry, and Mo. Rad Wagner. Rad, we missed you. We missed you. We noticed that the comment section was not as active, and so we are excited to have you back, and everyone else that's joining us today as well. As some of you may be newer viewers to this, we use Twitch as our platform to be able to basically have a very interactive discussion with you. So feel free to register on Twitch and then log in, and what you can do is you can participate then in our chat to ask questions and interact with the Stoneridge team that is on here as well. And we love to, educate and, kind of talk about what the capabilities are within really the Microsoft solution set for business systems, right? So we've got a good combo of people too. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, we should have lots of good questions and comments today. This is a good topic for that.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Today is, what are we doing? We're doing the Power Automate Happy Hour.
Power Hour. The Power Hour.
I thought it was Happy Hour. That's the one of those weeks, right?
It's the day before the observed 4th of July, so I'm sure there are a few happy hours starting in this time zone right now.
Yeah, I would not be surprised with vacations, right, that are going on right now. So, yeah, so today what we really wanted to be able to do is just really drill down into Power Automate, because we've, if you're a prospect and you're joining us, or if you're an existing customer or even on our team, the question has come up on what can you do with it, because quite honestly, what's happening now more and more often is that I'm in conversations with people and they're like, well, I'd like to be able to, create an approval request for this or integrate this into my system. And like, yeah, we can do that. And they just look at me like, what? This used to be, everyone else says that this costs, like 30, 40, 50, 60,000, X amount of dollars to do. And really with Power Automate, we can do a lot of those tasks that classically in the past we've had to code, right? I know, Marcus, that you've got a bunch that you've set up today, and you as well, Adam, but that's a pretty cool thing, right?
Yep. Yeah, I wanted to show some real practical use cases today, things that I've worked up to show people.
Yep, and I've been sitting on this use case for a while, like working on projects with a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, a lot of product owners, and I wanted to get out of my comfort zone a little bit, so laser focused on D365, all the customer engagement stuff. So I didn't do any customer engagement stuff. This is all modern workplace, productivity, Azure Devops. It's going to be fun to take a look at.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And so from my perspective, too, I did something very similar, right? So primarily finance and operations is what I demonstrate. But, in our organization, we also recognize now that each of us actually are demoing all the different solutions that are out there because they are so integrated now in terms of the business process that you tackle. So just even, understanding the tooling with it, like from my perspective, like you said, Adam, I have a modern workplace scenario with Teams that we're actually going to be looking at deploying as well here in our organization for the automation of team creation. But it all starts within Dynamics 365 CE is the theory, or Power Apps, or wherever that source is, right? So I've kind of role reversed a little bit here too, right, as part of it.
And we're saving Scott's for the last because Marcus and I didn't want to look bad. So we're gonna start with me, and mine is, look how simple this is. Look how easy this is. And then Marcus is going to go, now we're talking about business systems integrations. Look, we're a layer deeper. And then we're going to get to Scott, and Scott is going to go, shut it down. Yeah. We're going to take a look at everything.
Yeah.
And this like in the flow, like in the map of the flow, it goes like you probably couldn't even contain that in 3 screens.
No, you couldn't.
It is wild. It's wildly useful and incredible, and I love it. But I wanted to be first, so
different levels, right? I mean, different level, because we keep on talking about this is an end user tool, right? So,
Yep.
like Britt, thanks for joining, Britt. Like you said as well, being excited about it. I mean, there's so many different levels that you can do this to, and I had to tackle it in a much more detailed level because there are situations that Power Automate doesn't cover, right? So the question is, how do you then cover those, or is it the right tool to use for those? So, yeah, and then that's kind of the path that I think will just show that depth of what you can do with it. So keep it easy at the first year, make sure it works great, and then from there just drill into it. And then the intent here really is to get your mind around then what you can solution with it. And we can also talk a little bit of how you structure that as we go through this conversation, because just because it's an end user tool that does basically something very similar to just if then type logic, right? Or try catch, where if you have a condition occur with something, you take a particular route or action. I've always equated it to looking at a map. If you're looking for directions, sometimes there are multiple roads that you can take to get where you need to get. But those conditional choices that you make on the exit that you're going to take are just if-then statements, right? And basically what we've done with Power Automate is we've just mapped that then to a hierarchy. And we'll really highlight that as we go through this, that fundamentally is just really how Power Automate works, is that it's just taking what you used to write as a line of code, you're making a box. And it's a concept that's actually existed out there for quite a period of time. I know Visio used to have, and I forgot the name of it, of course, the industry term with it right now, where you can actually in your Visio diagram, UML, Universal Modeling Language, it was much more detailed user, right? So it's the same, like you think about a UML setup that you used to do back in the day, that was super
Totally
detailed,
forgot about that.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Totally forgot about that. In fact, I think they brought it back, didn't they? Didn't they bring back UML to Flow? Like you can actually design flows in Visio and port that to.
They did.
Oh man, I
and
totally
the UML modeler for it. So,
Yeah.
and that's like enterprise architect. Like when you start looking at some of the really higher end solution development that you use with it, these concepts have been in the industry for a long time. So it's really nice to see them bring it to an end user level, because it is great tools. But the problem with the tools has been it's just too much. Like really, I need to know my methods and overloads. And as an end user, it's like
train for 30 hours to understand the tool, and then what are we going to do with it?
Yeah. Entity relationship diagrams. Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, similar concepts, right, that are involved with that as well. So, Carl, good to see you too, by the way. So, well, I guess, guys, let's just jump into this. I think we got a little bit of a later start, a little bit of a longer intro, because we're going to have a lot of fun today. Like I said, guys, as you have questions, feel free to ping us. If you want us to see something, like a control with it, just let us know. We'll try to get that into the content for it. We've also had some debates internally, just so everyone on the stream knows, of actually going longer. Right now, we've had streams that are an hour at length. We'd really appreciate feedback from you guys if you'd like to see something deeper. We've talked about some concepts about that internally, of actually having a stream for a couple hours to be able to go into a deeper area of it, because quite frankly, we're pre-sales and we don't want this to come off really as a sales stream. It's really about the technology and the capabilities. That is really what we're trying to exhibit here, that I've not seen other streamers or competitors be able to really provide. Man, you're just waiting to say something right there.
Well, the real question is, do people want to see more of us?
That's a scary thing too, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's another topic, right?
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll figure it out.
Cool. All right, Adam, why don't you go ahead and present your screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip our view to look at your screen and start digging in here.
Yeah, I actually am going to just level set on one thing before we jump in and start looking at flows. I promise this isn't like a punt. But can you see that? Can you see this okay?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. I see the Power Platform.
Just because our teams work so well together, and everybody's got a unique background. Whether you're coming from ERP land or CRM land or custom apps land or none of the above, we all have a way of speaking about technology, and we all have a way of understanding the dynamics and the broader Microsoft ecosystem. And sometimes I take for granted a certain vernacular, like this is how we talk about this stuff. So I want to make sure that if anybody's joining today, we're understanding the focus area. It's implied in the title. It's directly in the title, Power Automate. But just to break down the pieces visually of what we're talking about, this is the Power Platform that is now underneath all of the business applications. So when we're talking about Dynamics 365 Sales, Dynamics 365 Business Central, Finance, Supply Chain Management, Field Service, Customer Service, Marketing, Project Operations. I almost said the old one. Those are point solutions for specific teams and business processes, and they come loaded with a lot of features. Underneath everything, we've got this whole toolbox. We've got the CDS toolbox. We've got the Power Platform. So just keeping in mind that, yes, we're focusing on Power Automate today, the automation engine, but we have so many other tools, these fundamental building blocks of how we can configure and customize and extend and tap into, just flex the D365 muscle or the Power Platform muscle, the data muscle. So, we've got Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Virtual Agents on the periphery of this, and there are deep integrations with all of those when we're thinking about Power Automate. But we've also got, when you think of the more like the granular pieces of when I'm building a flow, what's in there? Well, we've got data connectors. So what kind of data are we actually working with? What systems are we connected to? We've got portals. So external or, internal employee extended engagement via portal capabilities. So standing up web pages, building in portal specific automation and connecting to disparate data sources and making that all come together. And then the AI builder you see down below, that's another. Bots have been my life. I think I've mentioned that, but as of late anyway. But the AI builder is just so cool. It's so fun to play with, and it's so cool to see the not just the the shiny bells and whistles type of thing, but also the value that some of those models like object detection, sentiment analysis, trends that they provide. So just to give the baseline, this is what, this is the kind of the broader picture of the stuff we're going to take a look at today. So I'm done with PowerPoint. I'm going to kill that.
Ta-da! Look
All
at
right.
that. Is that?
So this is D365. This is not what we're looking at today.
Yeah, I know.
So what I do have, just to kind of give you an idea of the flow we're going to take a look at. Can you see, okay, the Power Automate portal?
Yep, we're good.
Cool. So this is my flow. We'll jump into this and take a look at the steps here, but it's a product development backlog request process. So I've been in projects before. I have to assume you fellas have been a part of projects before where we're working. We have our focus. We're working on like a BC or FinOps stand up, and that's our life. But for a lot of our customers and a lot of people that we speak with, there are concurrent projects. There are custom apps. There are portal solutions. There are design tools. There are a number of things that are going on within that IT department. And for those product owners, it can be kind of a lot to try to manage a lot, the stakeholder, the end user requirements, and what goes into that product development. And this doesn't have to be a Microsoft thing. This is portable to just IT product development in general. Now, usually it's sit down, ask, catalog, take notes, and then get those notes into whatever sort of backlog system that, quality or DevOps. Today we will be using Microsoft Azure Devops for the project management and the backlog of those projects. So, I was thinking about, well, what if we just streamline that? We use Power Automate to take in conjunction with Forms Pro, which is awesome, as well as Azure DevOps as the endpoint there. What if we streamline that process? So as a product owner, when somebody asks, hey, can I have a new field? Or, hey, can we reconfigure this form? Or, hey, can we start working with some of the XML on that output? And that, that's great. Every single instance we can say, we have a form for that. We have a tool. There's an app for that. So that's what I wanted to walk through today. So we'll break down the flow in a second, but let me pull up and we'll walk through this end to end at first, and then we'll break down some of the pieces. So where is that? There we go. So this was if nobody's been in Forms Pro before, it's awesome. It's so intuitive. If we go to, where is it? Forms here. I just kind of wanted to briefly show Forms Pro. Kicking off a new form is so easy, but if I go into this form that I built, which is our requirement submission form, it's got some, if you've ever built like Click Dimensions web forms, or there are a ton of, ISVs out there that have web form solutions, or, in Power Apps portals, some of the same, core pieces apply. We've got our attributes, attribute types, and structures. And what's really nice is we have logic in this form. So just to break down like how this looks and what we're expecting here. So we've got, the name of the individual, which is captured automatically, but just to force them, hey, who are you? Or maybe it's on behalf of. Down below, we got which project, for which project is the requirement. So I just set out a few Microsoft specific options here. So sales field service, a couple Power Apps, and then general website updates, and then a catch-all at the end there. Describe your requirement.
Yeah, like it's a good old info path, right, Rad? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Describe it. So what the heck do you need? What is your user story, or what is your requirement? What update or change are you requesting? And then this is where we have a little branching logic. So is the requirement time sensitive? Do we need to triage this higher? Do we need to prioritize this higher? And if this is marked yes, then we get that box down below. So just to show it's so easy to add new questions, different attribute types here. We can get advanced with Forms Pro, and this all does inject to a CDS entity, a Forms Pro entity. So we can port that data to any existing customers, or any, in terms of the broader use for Forms Pro, but pretty straightforward in terms of how to structure the form itself. I'll duck out of the admin for Forms Pro here. Now we'll look at
Forms Pro. Does that come with the Office 365 licensing? Isn't that part of that platform? Is that correct? Okay, just to make sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it does, as a standalone SKU, it does come with some other Microsoft solutions. You'll see, with Forms Pro added for X amount of dollars, but yeah, with certain Office tiers as well as Dynamics license models, this is going to be included, which is awesome.
Okay, cool.
So this is the form itself. I'll put in my name. I think today we're going to go with Jeff Goldblum. So Jeff he's a part of the field service project. He's going to be an end user. He wants to see some updates to maybe, the skills and certifications management. Maybe we throw some customization there. Maybe the schedule board. Maybe he needs a custom view on the schedule board within Dynamics 365 field service. So for which project is the requirement? I'm going to check 365 field service. Please describe your requirements. I need a Grandmaster based custom view suitable for galactic leaders in dispatching. That's not nerdy enough, is it? Maybe I should throw some more geeky pieces into that. But is this requirement time sensitive? Yes or no? So I'll just say it is, and then this is where we have that conditional. So I'm the Grandmaster. Give it to me now. Hopefully our end users don't speak in those terms, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll submit that. So it says, thank you. Your requirement request has been submitted. Please allow at least 3 business days for confirmation or additional questions from the product team. Pretty straightforward. We can go submit another response, but this is just, we have the URL, we can deploy that, we can provide that, we can embed that. But what this flow is going to do, so now let's go take a look at our flow. After we look at DevOps, this is the Pruvit moment. I just jumped into Pruvit. That's okay. So here I'm in DevOps, Azure DevOps, and I have a field service project here. So I'll go into that D365 field service project, and let's go to our boards and look at our work items. So we've got a few epics: bookable resource setup, core case design, core work order design. Oh, look, We have a couple of requests. So we have a requirement request. So what's happening is that Power Automate is taking that form submission for the product development request and structuring a work item with a prepended title of requirement request and tagging it. You can see that we have a D365 field service metadata tag on that work item. So if I go and crack this open, I assume the bottom one is what we just injected here. So we, like I said, we do have that tag up top, which is really cool. We'll take a look at that in the flow, but you can actually set the state. We can set a number in the advanced options for the DevOps item creation step. That we have a lot of information here. So please review the following information. This is I didn't play with the formatting. I just sort of pumped it in, but you can play with the formatting if you'd like. But it's, hey, Jeff Goldblum submitted this request. We have that email. We've got the information on that item here. So this is now a part of our product development process. So end users can request, and we can triage depending on the urgency, depending on who submitted, depending on the product tag. If we're for a specific project, which is really slick. So when we see our work items, and this is where in DevOps we can structure new queries. So we can set up a search for just our product requirements and triage those and slide those up into the the current sprint or maybe future state, some of the backlog. So I think it was really fun to structure this, and it was really fun to see, and it's got real world applications. So if we can go take a look at the flow.
Yeah, and just talking through that just at a high level. So, I mean, basically any form that you have, you could even have it like for us, if we look at our requests, you could have, during an implementation, you stand up a form for, product feedback or something of that nature, or even bug feedback, like a bug form that you could basically create as you go through an implementation process. And let's say you encounter something, you could have that form directly go into DevOps that we're maintaining, that we're doing all the bug fixes and testing and all that kind of stuff during the implementation process. Yep. I mean, you could set up something pretty rapidly here to then communicate that to the people that need to know that, which is really the developers that are working in DevOps, or the people that are working in DevOps, right? Because it handles PMs and all that. That's awesome.
And I see this playing a big role. So, like in our projects, we have something called conference room pilots. So end users get, we're now taking the core development and stakeholder team, we're broadening this out to the actual end users that are going to be using this, to get them hands-on, have them step through these scenarios. And if there are late stage issues that we have to rectify, we have to go take a look at, that's where we bubble those up, and we make dang sure that those are ratcheted down before we get things live, or even before we get to like the full script-based user acceptance testing. So, I can see this being, instead of sitting down and spending time as a resource, which can be expensive, maybe standing something like this up so we can glean that in real time, take a look at the results with the core stakeholder and product development team on the customer side, and then work through that accordingly and see what we can chunk out into go live versus what's going to happen afterward. So just kind of injecting some efficiencies into the process. But just to take a look at the flow itself, this is coming, I'm starting with a forms connection. So upon submission, that's our trigger. We select our form. So if you've got multiple, those will show up here. And then the response ID, this is pre-canned with the list of responses, because those do come in as child information. And then the work item on the DevOps side, I have to designate the org name, the project name, and I didn't put it in here, but I thought of it afterward. This is where if I had multiple projects, so we had the field service, we had custom apps, we had website or other, this is where we can throw in a condition. So if we look at our form submission here and we throw in a condition, this is where we can say, okay, if it's for field service project, go slide it into that project in DevOps. If it's for the website, we can actually kind of guide these things to where they need to live in DevOps. And then this is the work order creation, or I've been living in field service too long. This is the work item creation step. So we're designating where it's going to be dropped, and then down below I'm setting my title. Like I said, it's prepended with a requirement request, and then here are some of the dynamic information from the form itself, as well as the information that came through. So these are each of these, you can see these are the discrete fields that were living on the form. And if I wanted to add anything else, if I updated my form and I had additional questions and data points that were coming through, this is where I can add more data. And we have our dynamic content on the right-hand side here. So this is where we have all of our, let me scroll down a little bit more. This is where we have our questions that are coming through, or the responses to those discrete questions coming through.
Very cool.
So that's about it. It was a lot more time than I figured I ought to have, but working with some of these, the modern workplace tools and DevOps, and getting out of the Dynamics comfort zone a little bit more has been a heck of a lot of fun, and it happens a lot more frequently too with some of the solutions and the branching we can, getting our technologist tentacles out there.
Absolutely, that is really cool. I mean, it just really just highlights, obviously, the capabilities that we have to take something. So, Rad, I know you said like a report request, like a change to a report request. I mean, this could be public facing as well, right? I mean, you could have, a form design that then goes to DevOps, and we just showed DevOps as the recipient of that, but create a form, have that published, share that link. You could have that link embedded in your website. When a user clicks on that to give that feedback, it then goes and takes that particular action to populate. How long did that take you to really build out then? Like, was that a couple days, couple weeks?
A few hours.
Yeah, that's what I figured too.
Maybe,
I mean, right?
Maybe, it's been a dense week. I wanted to actually do a few more things, bells and whistles, and show different connectors. But this, very seriously, I think thinking about the use case that I wanted to display took more time than actually structuring the flow itself. And then the updates to the form would then have cascading. You need to kind of reconfigure a few things in the flow. So it was marrying up some of the reconfiguration, and with the end result that took the most time. But actually getting the flow in place, no time at all. I mean, it was
awesome.
Fast. Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's the power of the integration with it, right? And when end users are asking, like, well, how can you do that? Well, we can do it very rapidly. But remember as well from the enterprise perspective, right? So on the SMB side and smaller business side, you don't want a lot of layers of management and, I don't know, a lot of people, tout that project management at that level is not needed and things of that nature. I don't agree with that. But at the same point, if you need to be able to do something very rapidly, you can absolutely do that. But on the enterprise side too, you can do the opposite of that, and not meaning that it's not more rapid, but you just use it as a tool that you're using to basically deploy, but you still follow your process of defining your requirements, defining what you want the layout, the flow to be with it, what endpoints, what fields are there, all those types of details. You still document because you need that to be able to document how you did the particular process, right? So it's a great thing to scale, and that's why we do it with both, right? We show this with both BC, with FinOps, with CE, and just even standalone, kind of like what we're doing here today, right? It has that depth, which is great. So,
yep.
And then Marcus, you had some that were more towards the Business Central area with this, right?
Yep, I do. So we should have. All right, we look good transitioned.
We are good.
Yeah, so
yep.
I wanted just to specifically connect to Business Central. We haven't really showed Business Central stuff for a few confabs, so I wanted to get in there and look at that. First thing I wanted to just talk about was really sort of the standard approval processes that you can connect into Flow. So right off of my approval request, I've got the links to create flows. And out of the box, what happens is that the native connector will automatically create a flow. What I really like about this is you can now sort of take it apart, right? I can look at the standard one that was created, and I can use that as a template going forward to make changes to it, extend it if I want to. But this is what it does out of the box. So what we see is we've got the standard or the native connectors right to Business Central. So that's just the Business Central connector. Built in there then is it's going to see the multiple environments, my production, my sandbox environments. It's going to allow me to select my company. Those are things that are going to pop in there by default. But again, if you're creating one from scratch, you can change it. And then I've got the multiple conditions. So if you're familiar with the way workflows in Business Central work, same concepts are here. I can set up, different restrictions. Credit limit is, increased versus decreased, et cetera. So this is just a customer approval request. It's there. It uses the get record function to then pass the ID to pick up the customer. This is starting the native approval process then that's part of, or the part of Power Automate. Again, we can modify that. So like you saw with Adam taking these, dynamic values and populating them, I'm taking dynamic values and populating them in the email that's being sent to the person that's going to do the approval request. So I can send information, name, address, etc., off of the transaction included in the email that's going to be sent. The other nice thing that I really like is the ability to actually create a URL back to the source transaction in Business Central. So if you want the user to be able to quickly find the record that they're dealing with, I could include that in the approval process. And then for those that didn't know, there is a way to actually connect a URL, send the company, as well as a filter string to the Business Central application. So that's kind of a cool. That's for free, right? Because that's
That is absolutely cool. Yeah.
So then conditions: approved, yes. What am I going to do? Not approved. What am I going to do? So in here, I added a post to. I'm using a post to a Teams channel to say yes. Notify the sales and marketing team that a new customer has been approved or something like that. So again, full interaction with email, Teams, other things that you might want to do. But the nice thing about this is I added this Teams connector. Everything else is really out of the box. I tweaked the details of the email that comes through, but again, to the point of I don't need to be a developer and really know how much of this works to make modifications to the standard stuff. Microsoft provides that with these with the flows that come from Business Central.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first one. Let me see. Next one I wanted to do was actually this: when a record's changed. This one I created manually just to give you an idea of what we could do. So there is another native connector here that connects with the API to Business Central, and it's just saying when a record is changed, I want to do something, and that's when a record is created, when a record is modified, and delete. I basically have those three pieces against it. So this is just saying somebody updated a vendor record, and what do I want to do with it? Well, I want to get record, and then I want to update my CDS record. So this is just showing you, yeah, I can actually integrate with CDS here. When my vendor changes, get my vendor record, and then update my vendor entity in my common data service. So interacting with CDS has been a question that comes up frequently. There's an example of how I can make that work. And again, it doesn't have to be CDS. It could be anything. It could be an email, a Teams post, a connection to whatever we'd want to do. But showing you trigger on change essentially within Business Central, part of the native connector. All right, next one was the other way around. So when a record is updated in CDS, I actually want to write it back to BC. This is 2 steps. When a record is updated in the CDS, so again, I'm looking at a purchase order entity that I created. Then I want to update a record in Business Central. So this is the other way. So we did BC to CDS. Now this is CDS to BC, 2 steps. And you can see it's going to pull up all these fields that I have access to, dynamically set values. I didn't have to do anything to make this happen. Pull native connector, put it in place, and it works. The caveat there, are all the fields listed? No, they're not. So there is some limitation with the native API, but you're going to get pretty close out of the box and be able to see how these things interact with one another. The next one was here is when a record was created. So again, using a CDS trigger, when a record is created, I'm going to get the vendor record, and then I'm going to actually create, in this case, a purchase order into BC. Similar idea, but a native there. Now, cool one I think is really good. So we worked this up actually as a scenario for a demo for a prospect. So the use case here was they used SharePoint to store documents, and what they wanted to be able to do was when a SharePoint document was created, they wanted to create a billing transaction on the job. So we said, oh, we can do that. So what we did is we set up, this is just demo. So, looking at a document library in SharePoint, when a document is created, now again, we're pre-sales, so I had some do and tell conditions in here so they could populate the job and the task on that document to know what am I going to bill. So that probably would have to be reworked a little bit, but, go get my record, go get the values of that SharePoint document. And then I'm actually just using an HTTP post operation here within Flow to create the billing record in Business Central. Now, the job journal is not natively exposed in the API. So what I had to do was, I'll just show you this quickly. So I created an extension, and I created a job journal page with a page type of API. So not native to the application, but I created my own page type of API. I put the fields that I wanted to on there related to the job journal, and then I can use the post operation to connect and update the record. Actually, create the record in this case because it's a post. I can actually modify records if I wanted to as well. I loop back, update the SharePoint library that says, "Yep, I've billed or I've created the billing record." Send an email, send a Teams post.
And
So,
I just want to highlight that post operation right there. So when you go to that HTTP post there, obviously it's also SSL because it's got the encryption that component that's related to it. The reason I'm just highlighting this is that within Business Central, you may have your partner say if you wanted to do a flow, or maybe you've even noticed it that when you try to go create that flow, that like you said, Marcus, that table's not exposed. And then you
right.
go to the web services and you try to add it there and it doesn't show. And then you develop it and then you publish it and you expect it to work with the Business Central connector, which was what Marcus was highlighting before. They don't allow, and this is feedback to Microsoft if you are on the line, allow custom-based services to be added to the API that are exposed then with the flow. I know there's talk about it, but I know that that's a very common scenario for our customers
Yep.
that want to use this, that that table isn't exposed, and so we want to be able to add it. Well, the nice thing, we know how to do it. We're documenting it here for you too, so you got a little bit of an advantage because you can use this in a production environment too, I'm assuming, Marcus, right,
Yep.
with that post command.
Absolutely. Yep. And the key here is the custom page type API. I would probably, if I was going to put this in a development environment, also create a custom table, load the data to the custom table, because then you can just do more with it.
Yep. And that's where it goes to that. Go ahead.
I'm
Yep.
hitting the job journal line directly. Not a good idea in production.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a journal, right? I mean
Yep.
it's demo code concept that are with
Yep.
it. But the nice
Exactly.
thing about this that you're highlighting is that you've gone from basically a static setup, so we're getting a little bit deeper here, right? So in terms of developer-wise, we've got citizen developer, and then we've got people that are actually doing active dev work with it. This is starting to align more closely then to that, where you actually have to then go through and make those changes to more than one system, write some code for it to expose it. And maybe that's just multiple team members that are involved to be able to tackle that as part of that process. Yep, go ahead.
And that kind of speaks to the scalability of these tools. When they were really entering the scene, and there's a question of, well, developers, what is the role, what is the niche here? This is where it is. Microsoft talks about no cliffs, which is kind of cliche here and there, but like our tools are no cliff. There's a no cliff solution, meaning it can support your requirements and the build and extensibility to a certain point, and then it falls off. So Microsoft is touting no cliffs. We can, and really this right here, or if you look at things like Power Virtual Agents with the broader Azure Bot framework, or Power Apps with some extension, we've got the ability to roll in developers, actual code, database work, data work, extending these low code, no code solutions. So yeah, I mean, there really aren't cliffs when you're looking at using these tools.
Yep.
Yeah.
One last thing here, Scott, before we transition over to you. This, if you're building Power Apps and want to interact with Business Central data, this same functionality is available over there. You're going to use an HTTP post or patch method on your Power App. So just know if you're venturing that direction, same idea is possible there.
Thanks for the follow, Chris. Appreciate it. That is really cool, Marcus. Very, very cool. So, okay,
right.
Do we want to jump over into the one that you guys can hack apart too and have some fun with here? Is that what we're going to do next?
Yep.
All right. This will be fun. I have not tested this in a while, so this should be fun. Just kidding. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and now share my screen. So let's go ahead and flip to our 3-sticker roll. There, we've switched it, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up one of my screens that I have in here as well.
I really like the idea of Adam and myself on there multiple times. I think
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought
it's
too.
meeting
Is
a
like,
need of the audience.
where's
somewhat.
Rich at? Right, I think there's a joke
Oh,
going right now. We got to get Rich's.
Stoneridge's
Somebody get it, Rich's image going on
most
here.
searched man. Yeah, whatever it
The
was.
best looking man at Stoneridge.
Class of himself, a
Yeah.
class on his own,
In his own tier.
right?
Rich, I hope
Yeah.
you're watching. I really hope you're watching. If not, we're going to send the video to you. Okay, so we've gone through a couple of different levels here. So first off, obviously, just going through the base concepts of flow. Adam covered that in a lot of detail too, showing how you can add different components, obviously, to go through that process. Marcus brought it a step further, where we're now talking more ERP. We're talking about some posting that can occur with it as well, that HTTP post that was there, more for that like custom mixture type of a thing. And now for this one, what we wanted to highlight was really that additional layer. So this is really much more dev specific. And what I mean by that is that I have a condition here where we do not have a connector. And what I mean by that is that when you go to your connectors over here and when you actually search for a capability that you want to integrate with, right, that you want to be able to go through and add, yeah, Britt, I love it. I absolutely love to chat right now with Britt on this. The searchability in Google. Yeah, agreed. So, but the point here is that what you have are all these different connectors that we've been highlighting, like Business Central or SharePoint or the HTTP post. Excuse me, I always add too many T's into it. Point is that not every system has a connector, right? And you want to be able to then integrate with that. And there are a couple of options. So, like you saw with Marcus, the HTTP post operator that's there beyond the connector for the action when we look at it is something then that you can also reverse, meaning you can actually have it where flow can be waiting for a request to a specific web address that then calls that flow to do something. That's one scenario that we could probably look at as well. There's going to be a hashtag now, guys. Rich Studer. Let's see how many hashtags of Rich Studer we can get going in chat here. So what I want to highlight is how do you make what we would classify as a custom connector? And a custom connector allows you then to take a web service or a service that is exposed via, for example, OData. We'll start there. And then translate that into a format then that that Power Automate or Flow can interpret, so that way it can be one of those boxes that's inside of that particular flow. And so to do this, in my scenario, I have a scenario where I've actually built a solution around this as well. And this is where we start getting into concepts with the common data service. We'll go ahead and let that flow recreate here in a second. But you can basically then create these different types of solutions that exist in the environment to go through and then basically make changes or add features to it. And I was in the wrong environment, so we're going to pull the right environment up. So you can group everything together. So like Marcus was saying, he would have added a table for it. Well, in my scenario, for what we call our account team link processing inside of our environment, I've got a couple of different entities that entities, objects that I've added into this particular solution that I can then package up and then deploy. So I can take this and then do it in dev and then move it to testing and then go to production. And what's really cool about this is that, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, this is really the Dynamics 365 CRM, right? The way that you would deploy functionality or add to it is you would build solutions, right, to be able to extend then Dynamics 365 for sales or some of those other areas. Is that it? Correct?
That's exactly it. This is, when we talk about XRM solutions, this is at the heart of it. So how we create, how we package, how we deploy application lifecycle management, a lot of that is based on what the CRM pros out there have been working with hands-on since forever.
Exactly.
I started getting my hands dirty in 2011, maybe 4.0 way back in the day. So it's been there for some time.
Yeah, it's pretty dang cool. So a couple things here just to highlight. So in here I have a table, the account team link table that I created. And in this table, I'm going to show you why I have a table throughout this process. But I just wanted to start a little bit more complex, but still keep the concept simple here so that you can kind of follow with what we're doing. I've got a status field, which is just an option set, which is an option that can be added into the record. And then I've got 3 other areas here that are really specific towards Power Platform. I've got a Graph API connector, and we'll talk about that in a second. I've got a team automation canvas app that I've created, and then I also have basically a flow that's been added to this particular solution. And so what this allows me to do then is put together that customization that involves many different areas into a solution that I can package so that way I can maintain it. So you're not then maintaining individual flows and then sharing them. You have a solution that you deploy for this, which means, you start looking at DevOps, you've got change management, you've got, all those other capabilities from a development point of view that you can start following as well in terms of those best practices, which is much more common in larger organizations, obviously. The point here, though, the really key thing here is that this process, what it does is it actually goes through, and when you're in Dynamics 365 on the account record, for example, you can create a flow to automatically create team sites from within Dynamics 365. And there's kind of that capability already inside of Dynamics 365 for sales, but at the same point, it's not as advanced as what we needed, for example, because we want our team site to generate. We want it to add additional tabs. We want it to add Active Directory groups. We want it to, and all these different things that need to occur when we generate a team. And the native connectors that are there just don't have all of that. But Microsoft has published a bunch of programming APIs that we can access through web services. And that could be, post methods that are going and doing that. And the thing about it is that, that is much more complex, obviously, to be able to do that process. But what we don't have, though, are those endpoints, those connectors. So
I just want to
really
start chanting graph.
Yep.
Graph.
So, and graph is, if you don't know what that is, graph is actually like we have the common data service and we have this whole API model on Dynamics, for example, on the business division, business side of Microsoft. On the what I call the classic side, which is the modern workplace side, everything that you want to interact like with Azure Active Directory or with Teams or Office or any of those types of products generally use Graph to be able to communicate with that. So there's if you go to the Graph API as a developer and look at the details with it, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of calls that you can make to be able to then do a particular action in Office or on Azure Active Directory or even in Azure for that matter. And that's all through the Graph API is how that is typically tackled. So what we had to do is we had to go through and then map those APIs to do that. Now, we're not going to get into the details of how to map those. Basically, what it is it's a Swagger definition file that you use. And to be able to create a Swagger definition file, typically you use tools like Postman or SoapUI. It just depends on what you're comfortable with to be able to go through and define, those connectors to be able to generate basically a Swagger file. And I can just highlight it here. So I've got the connector open right here. This is the Graph API. And if I go, for example, into my Swagger editor here, this is where you basically go through and define the parameters and the requirements that this connector has to take data from within a flow and then translate it into a custom connector that basically then connects to the Graph API as part of that particular process. So you can see here, there's lots of different stuff that's inside of here. What I did is I actually used Postman to go through and generate this particular content. And you can see then that there's all these different types of operations that are available now for me to interact with. I can check installed apps. I can do a lot of these different things as basically connection points to interact with. So that's the first step. Once this is custom, once you want to expose, it could be an on-prem application even theoretically. Once you have that endpoint defined and you define the collections and you define, what methods you want to do, post means I'm sending data, get means I'm grabbing it back to gather that information. Basically, you deploy this, and in our solution that we were looking at, we then have the ability to basically reference then that particular connection. So let's go take a look at my flow that I have that then has that in here. Adam's like, no, I know.
No, I in my heart of hearts, I'm saying yes.
Yeah, I know, but it's just,
But
it's like, yeah,
it's too. The problem here is it's too awesome.
Is there such a thing?
Yeah.
Not for Scotty Fraps.
Yeah.
No, there's never such a thing.
Always something to tackle, right, with it. So same concept though, like what Adam was showing and that Marcus was showing. You know, from here, this looks, you know, I've got some different box colors, right, to start here with it. But really, what we're saying here is that when an account, so this is basically an event-driven flow. So when an account link is actually being added into here, I want to take a particular action that's related to it. No, Rad, nope. So, but what we can do here is we can basically reference then the environment, the entity that's related to it, and then define that scope of when that happens. So basically when a record is added to that table that we just referenced, what we want it to do is we want it to do some stuff. And so from a development point of view, there's a lot of concepts called initialization of variables, meaning these are values or variables that I want to use in my flow further on in the process. So I wanted to be able to have a default timeout, and whenever I want to reference that default timeout, for example, in a flow as one of those fields like Marcus had shown, I now have a variable that I can plop into there when I'm designing my flow. So what I like to do is I like to put all my variable definition up front for us developers. This is more like our globals, right, for our definition of variables. And then I want to do some particular action with it. So when that link is created, initialize a bunch of variables that are used on the back end as I'm processing this. And then basically I want to check and see, is this status of this record that's been updated ready to process? And we're going to click on this, and this is where it gets more fun. I'm going to try to move this up too for you guys because I can see that on our stream we've got Marcus blocking us. So we'll go above Marcus's head. There we go. And you can see we have our ready to process that's here then that happens with it. Now when I expand this, basically what I'm doing is I'm setting a conditional. You can see now all of a sudden my screen has gone blank. And this is the reason why. Let's go back over to the center. Basically, if the record is ready to process, I have a value here that's being checked, and this actually is coming from that initial request up at the top there, that record that's related to it. Basically, I'm just verifying that it is ready to process. So maybe there's a different status that we add into that table in the future, and we don't want that record to process until somebody says it's ready to process, so we can scale this flow. But you can see here now that below it then, when it gets to that, this is that if statement that Marcus had. Mine is much larger, right? You can see this big green box that we have right here with it. If yes, there's some logic that's happening here. But if no, there's nothing happening. The flow fires, checks. If it's not ready to process, don't waste any more time with it, right? Just leave the flow. Don't do anything with it. And so that's a very easy way then to escape it. But if we set here and look at this now, basically, we're saying, yes, it's ready to process. And look at this. This is a call back now. So basically, we started off with the record being passed into here. We check and validate that it's correct. And now that we know it's ready to process, we go back into the actual record and then update it to a different status now of processing.
It should be called out here that this looks really daunting when you look at it top down. The actual logic that's in there doesn't need to be as robust as it is here to execute what we need. But Scott is building in catch conditions and conditionals along the way and exit clauses. So that's why it looks a lot more complex than it. I mean, it is complex. Don't get me wrong. But like at first glance, you go, oh.
Yeah, and you see the screen expand, and you're like, "What the heck?" Right?
Understanding that like this is following best practice in exits, and understanding that it's intended to be both performant and we can catch the bugs and things like that.
Yeah, because I mean, just to that point, I mean, you've got to really make sure that you capture the scenarios that can occur. Meaning, so in this situation, I don't have a try when I'm updating a record. And if you know from a development point of view that if you're trying to update a record and another process is blocking it, or you get an error while you're doing that, typically you do a try catch finally, right? To go through that process to then catch the error, the exception, and then have a different path where you're communicating then that exception or that error in that process. So really what we're doing here then in this situation, we're not encapsulating that, as I would call it, but in here we are. So you can see I'm setting the record to processing, and then I've got this what's called a scope process that I'm applying then as another process. And when I expand then this scope object that's in here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the CDS main account name. So you can see get the main account record. So it goes based off of the CDS entity ID for the account that's related to it. And basically I'm setting a variable then inside of this try. I'm trying to grab that account name. Now, if that try fails, if I go to the far right over here, you can see that there's a condition then that fires off right here that updates the status of the CDS account name. And in this particular flow for this action, what you can do is you can configure run after then for it, basically to say then, when that particular process executes, if it fails, I want you to run this. I want it to go over into this area. But if it's successful, I want it to continue over here to a delay that we're having inside of our process. And you can see the configure run after for this. This delay only runs if this process above was successful. So if there's no error while it's grabbing that particular record and then setting that variable basically, which you probably would never have an error with that, hopefully not. But basically then, if it doesn't succeed, it'll go to the fail and update that record, and then it'll go back over here, and if it succeeded, it'll do a delay. Because we're touching multiple systems in this, we want to make sure that that record has been committed by the system with it. So that's kind of the entire structure, just really at a high level. We're doing a try for it. We're basically going ahead and trying that process. We're trying to create an Azure Active Directory group through the process. If that fails, we need to update the record to say it failed during the Azure Active Directory group creation. We're trying to then create the team site, right? So it's just taking what we already have that we've documented and talked about, and even expanding it more, basically, making it so that we can have conditional errors as part of it. And then the other thing here, though, is that when we try to create this Azure Active Directory group, for example, number one, we're doing a check to see if it has been created. But if it hasn't been, you can see that if it's not been created, that it actually calls that custom connector that we were just talking about. So this is not a connector that I added by clicking on the add action or the plus here for an existing one. This is that custom connector that we defined the definition for. So when we expand this then, all of the values or fields that were required or needed to be able to basically take this request and send it to the Graph API is now exposed here. So I've added my description, my display name. I've added my owners that are related to this. So these are just some additional details basically for it, for the setup of it. And what I'm doing then is after it creates this particular process or creates that record, I'm taking the result back and defining then what the result is as well, so I can take these values that were created and set variables related to them. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking that connector, submitting this particular information based off of my flow setup that I have, taking the results of the system, saying whether or not it succeeded or not, and if it did succeed, what is the new active directory group ID, and I'm setting that as a variable, so I can then go back to the record on the account team link table and then say, hey, here is the ID that was generated with it. So this is just programming, right? This is what we look at as classical programming. And all I'm doing with this is instead of doing an HTTP client to go ahead and do it, or a contract or any of that, I'm doing it in this particular flow to tackle that. So I don't need to know C# or code to do this. I can reference that in here and then generate that. So then we can have other people maintain this theoretically. And then finally down here, just to kind of highlight one other capability, what I just wanted to show here is, we go try to create the team site. We add the team app to the team site as well as part of the process. Each of these are basically custom connector calls that we have that are occurring inside of here. We create a sales channel, a project channel, a support channel, and we catch any errors basically that try when that team site is created. You can also have multiple paths merged together, and that's one thing I just wanted to highlight with it, because when we create all these particular channels in Teams, for example, we then basically have a catch that can occur for if any of these particular ones fail, because we want to designate the entire process as failed because not every single one completed. So you can see here I can join them together as part of this process, and then finally finish it off to update the record to say, hey, the team was created for that processing value. So, it looks like a lot. It is, I will say, after I've used it a little bit, initially I was concerned with the movement around for it. Once you understand the flow with it and what you're trying to do for your conditions and the layout for it, it actually becomes pretty easy to manage. I was able to create this and then maintain it as part of that process. So, that's the deeper stuff right there. And then finally, let's just take a quick look at how that actually runs then. So, for example, I have a form here that I can interact with. So in my solution, when we were looking at it, if we go back into our solution, I'm going to say I'm done with the editing of that particular one. What I can do here is I can actually look, for example, at my account team link that's related to this. And in my account team link, you're going to see that there's going to be a bunch of records that have been generated for this. So if I go to my forms and we take a look at our information form, I think is what I updated with this. We'll just click on that and then pull it up. I don't know why, Adam, that's changed now. It usually opens up the editor in here. I must have some component misconfigured here for it. But in here then, this is a form then that we can interact with to be able to basically get to that detail. And it wasn't the information form. It looks like it was actually the main form. I need to open just to show that. Let's go ahead and open that tab. And so if you're used to CRM development, you'll probably be pretty comfortable with this. I am not as comfortable with this, but it's absolutely a fun learning experience. You can see here, if I just zoom in just a little bit, I've got my account team link information here as my view. I've got fields that I need to maintain and interact with as part of this. I also have an information tab that's inside of here as well to be able to then drive this. So I could take this and then publish this as well so that it's now available. I could add additional fields that are in here, and these fields reference basically that particular table as you go through your particular process. So another thing here as well, though, is if we go back into our solutions, and I'm going to go backwards here, is that not only do I have a form that I can interact with and enter that data, but I also can call this process from different areas. And in our solution, in our account team link processing, you can see I have a Canvas app that's inside of here as well for that, that I could actually go ahead and, for example, edit. And so now if I want to use a Power App, to do that particular submission for this request, for example, I can create a Power App for it too. So the one form we were looking at before was really specific towards Dynamics 365 for sales or CE or the customer engagement perspective, and that's that layout and look and feel related to it. Well, maybe you want to create a Power App that your end users can connect to go through and then submit, for example, an account team link for it. So you can see here, I've got our list of accounts that are here that I could click on to then generate then that account team link. So I can actually package now additional data where I don't have to then have a Dynamics 365 for sales license for this. I could do the $10 per month per user app license if I wanted to be
Only
able to
if
then
you're using
interact
one.
with this. Yep. Only if you're using one, right? Otherwise, it's is it $40 for unlimited or something like that? If I remember.
Yep.
So just
10
to
is
be able
one
to
app.
scale. Yep, 10 is one app. Yep.
Okay, got it.
So that being said, then let's just take a quick look at the data process with this as well. So basically, when that record is being added inside of the account team link, it will actually go through and then generate that particular team, and it'll step through that entire process. So I think I may have one in here that's set up. So let's take a quick look at my flow, which is right here. Let's go back over here. I want to see if I don't have any runs in this environment that I've executed. Let me just double check if I can take the team. We're going to go ahead and see if we can actually, we're not going to edit it, we're going to test it. So I'll go to my edit. We'll go to test over here too, and this is one thing I haven't highlighted. I use this quite a bit as well as we're going through and doing the trigger actions with it. So I'm going to go ahead and test with this as part of it. And depending upon how you set up your flow, so there's many different ways that you can set up a flow that then reflect basically the data that would be sent to it. One option would be that you actually just make it a button click type event. So you can actually create a flow then that has a request form that pops up that you can then enter in the data that's related to it. Right now we're monitoring this, and basically what happens is that if I want to create a new record, for example, or I want to add a record, so we're going to add something inside of here, what I can do is I can say I want to add my name. This is going to be Scott Frappier. I can specify my account information if I have an account information that I wanted to add here as well. So these are example accounts that we have inside of here. So I can say like Clam Corporation. You can see here it's asking me for my Azure Active Directory group mail. So you can define, for example, this is Clam Corp at stoneridgesoftware.com. I've got my environment ID, and these types of things as a developer typically, you're going to know this information, or you're going to be able to dig into this information to grab then, for example, the environment ID, the application ID. These are all programmatic concepts that exist there. But basically, once you've gone through and then done these updates that are related to it, so I can put my app ID, I can put my CDS entity ID as well. What I can do is I can save this, and when I'm saving this particular record, I intentionally made an error with it. What's happening is it's actually going through and then triggering that particular flow. So depending upon your setup then that you have, it's basically going to go and run through that particular flow action. We probably won't have time to show the exacts with it as it goes through here, but it'll actually fire off that flow and then do all those particular actions and then update the information basically as it's going through and doing that particular flow process. Eventually we would see that this request turns into ready to process and save to close it, and then eventually it'll start executing this particular flow, and from there then you have basically created a way to create a flow. You can see your flow is running. To create a flow, and you can see it stepping through each process here. Is the record set to ready to process? It'll refresh here in just a second. And it'll go through and do the entire process as part of this. So
yeah, this is actually really nice. You can watch what's happening on the flow if you're trying to troubleshoot it as it's going through here. And I found that those errors, the error details, they're actually pretty good.
Yeah.
You read through them and you can figure out without a lot of work what's actually happening.
Yep.
Historically not the case, and
yeah, right.
we're getting checkers for like not every tool, but all the Power Platform tooling. We have bot checkers, we have flow checkers here, we have app checkers. So it's actually baking in. Hey, you need to make sure you're checking these boxes to make this fully functional because we're identifying some issues here. But if you hit a snag beyond that, you can see along, it's a visual, you can see where it's hitting that snag, and then it actually does have that nice output.
Yeah, and you can see right there, it basically just brought me right back to where the error was. It said view connections, it said fix error, and I fixed it in that situation. Now in mine, I have testing here, obviously, so usually this is more of like a service account that you're aligning it to, or an app registration is much more typical of how you build your permission connections that are related to it. But now that I've gone through and then made those changes, for example, to here, and if I wanted to rerun it, we can see I can put it in test with it, and I could actually even use the previous one that executed to show, for example, this one failed. Let's go ahead and just use the previous request, because really what it's doing is it's packaging up a file that it's sending to Flow when that record is being generated. And now in this condition, we can see then, what happens if we now have the connection. Is it able to go back into the environment and grab that particular record, the account ID? And I purposely put an invalid account ID inside of here just to highlight then as well that you can, on this record then, it would update and that information inside of here would say where it failed. So you can see the error message right here came back, unable to create the AAD group requested, right? So it actually comes back and then says what those particular errors are, so that way you can debug it even further as part of that process. So
yeah, I like that rerun with previous data. When I was doing that SharePoint thing, I got sick of uploading and deleting these documents as you're testing this, and you can bypass a lot of that busy work.
Yep. So just a lot of expansive capabilities, just showing, at a very, we didn't get into a lot of detail with it, obviously, but at the same point, just to highlight, yeah, you've got, a custom application that doesn't have a connector to it, but has web services that are available. Create a connection, a custom connector, and then you can use Flow then to be able to connect with that, which is a pretty powerful capability.
My two big takeaways from today were Scott's got flow chops, and the demo customer image that you had in your BC environment, Marcus, looked like Nick Kroll's hotter business brother. I had to throw that. I've been sitting on that one for half an hour.
Love it.
They have some weird pictures in here.
Stock image. I was like, is that? Looks like Nick Kroll. No, wait, no. A more attractive Nick Kroll. Is that right? Okay, all right.
Flow chops is going to be our next hashtag.
Flow chops.
So, yeah. So yeah, that kind of concludes, our high level, and that's why we've always talked about making these a little bit longer too, to be able to actually dive in and create those. Or, I've watched some streams on Twitch where they're actually doing game dev, and she's getting into code and all the details related to it. And, we really absolutely do want to do that at some point. It's just, time-wise and audience-wise, we want to make sure that everyone can take a little bit away from our conversations. And it looks like Adam's got something to show.
I've got my nerdy cameo of the week, or the bye week, whatever. Yeah. So this is a custom blacksmithed replica of Dawn, the legendary sword Dawn from Game of Thrones. This came from the Netherlands, and it is my wife's, and it's amazing. So that's it. I haven't had a Game of Thrones, I don't think anyway, a cameo. So this is pretty awesome stuff. I'm building my nerd portfolio on this stream. It's the best thing.
Yeah, you're able to show everything that's there, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Awesome. All right. Well, a couple of quick just announcements so that we're all on the same page. I know everyone is excited for your 4th of July weekend. We are as well, so this is a great thing. Hopefully everyone will stay safe and have a great time. We are going to be reconvening on July 16th to really go through the Business Intelligence Power Hour. So, we've kind of highlighted Flow and all these great capabilities inside of Flow, but next step is that we're going to take a look at Power BI. And I think I'm planning to mix Power Apps, Power BI, and Power BI. Maybe I'll have a Power App that exists inside of it. I mean, really want to show and highlight some of those cool capabilities. So you're
saying you're going
that is
last
next
again.
I don't know. Maybe not. This was one I created already, right? So
Adam, you and I should probably just get together and put something together to show.
Just nail it. Just out of this world.
Yeah. Beat me out, push me out. And then it says that on the 30th we've got a Power Apps Power Hour then too. So we're going to go through a power hour of each of these and just show different solutions and concepts that integrate different technologies to give you some ideas on what you can do. And yeah, if you have questions with it, make sure to ask in chat, ping us at any point as well. We'd be more than happy to really dive in deeper and help you through this really cool journey. I mean, this is exciting. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and to be honest, I absolutely love the direction that they're going with this. This is absolutely very cool. So